Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome once more to the ROS Media platform. Today we are covering our weekly webinar Q&A. So you've visited the webinar on Saturday, 30th of May. You've had questions. As always, we've collated those questions together and we're going to answer them for you today on the session. If you're joining us live on socials, welcome as well. If you don't know who I am, or don't know who this other gentleman is, then my name's Andy. I'm the head of the Republic of Old Souls media platform here. I'm joined with my good friend Ian Clifford, who is our founder and our president of the Republic of Old Souls Nation. He's also responsible for all of the protocols that we have, including our flagship, which is the Monopoly Game Changer protocol. But let me ask you this, or let me just say this. If you've spent your life believing that you're a debtor, constantly chasing capital through the hard work and labor that you put in, to pay off loans, mortgages, credit cards, I need you to pause for a second because you're playing a game that you were set up to lose. Winning this financial game requires that you have a number of things in place. And Saturday, we covered something really pivotal to that, which is the foreign grantor trust, a 98 series foreign grantor trust, and why that is so instrumental in the protocols that we have here, but also in your ability to achieve real true financial freedom for you and your family. I think just for the basis of the audience, Ian, let's start with just the historical baseline, because you often talk about the transformation of House Joint Resolution 192, 1933, and how that really changed how money works. So maybe you could speak to that. How does that House Joint Resolution 192 change the way that we view money, how it actually works, and how does registering a birth certificate place an individual into this debtor trap that you speak of?
Yeah, well, I refer to it as a modern slavery system, and it's very sophisticated in how it operates. We used to have money of substance. So over 100 years ago, there was gold and silver coins. There was physical gold backing the money, and the banks had to match the amount of gold they had in reserve to the amount of notes they put out into the economy for commerce. Well, the bankers and the bloodline banking families, they wanted to bring a new system in which would enable absolute control of the people, and using the monetary system to do it, probably the most effective way of getting the world population to behave in the way you want them to, without them realizing that they're being controlled. So everybody's operating in like a prison camp, but very few people actually know it's a prison camp. And the way it's being developed and rolled out and maintained is quite a genius in its design and in its execution. The people actually believe that they own things, and they believe that they can prosper playing in this system, which they probably don't even realize is a system. And because everybody else around them is doing the same thing, it's very easy to be deceived and just carry on the way that everybody else around you carries on, and never challenge what's really going on. So in 1914, the First World War kicked off, and that really was to disguise the introduction of the Federal Reserve Act, which came 1 year before in 1913, where the top bankers had got together in the United States. The United States was becoming the world reserve currency. The British pound was disappearing as a world reserve currency, having been, the dominant worldwide force for many years. The empire, the British Empire was starting to fail, and the American empire was rising. And so the world reserve currency shifted from the pound to the dollar. And in order for the dollar to be the central currency of the world, they had to crash the economy, and that happened in the early 1930s, which was the Great Depression. Well, that enabled the banks to bail out the United States government, which is a corporation, and in exchange for the bailout was to insist that the corporate government confiscated the gold. So everybody in the United States had to hand over their gold. And then a new monetary system was launched based on Federal Reserve notes, or FRNs. So the dollar became the currency that the United States used. And then about 15 years later, in the Bretton Woods Accord in 1944, all of the other nations adopted the same system, which was the bankruptcy of the United States. And the United States Treasury was appointed by the creditors as the bankruptcy trustee. So the whole world started operating in trust, but not only in trust, but where the trust itself has creditors on one side and debtors on the other side, like a big ledger, but it's all operating in bankruptcy. So what we call money is actually debt, and the debt springs into existence based upon a mortgage that was taken out across the entire trust, this worldwide trust, where the United States Treasury operates as the bankruptcy trustee. The original bloodline banking families are the original creditors. Everything within this bankruptcy is artificial. So all the citizens are artificial. That's the birth certificate constructs. All of the companies, all of the governments, everything that's playing on this, I call it the monopoly game of commerce. Everything is artificial. There's no substance. It's all based on debt. And in order to underwrite the bankruptcy, collateral was taken to hold for the benefit of the creditors. Well, that collateral includes the birth certificates that became securitizations, using the human energy of the living men and women who are the agents for the birth certificates to basically underwrite as surety, as the underwriters, the liable parties, as agents for the birth certificate constructs, which are operating on this monopoly board, which is a trust. It's all operating in bankruptcy. Everything was mortgaged to support the original bloodline banking family creditors. So what we've got going on now is a usufruct system where the people can use stuff that is held in trust. They can use it, they can never own it, so they can use land, property, cars, businesses, in anything really within the monopoly board is they're using it as the agent for the birth certificate construct. The birth certificate construct holds equitable title. That's the ability to use it but never own it. And because people are the agent, the living men and women are the agents for the birth certificate constructs, the birth certificate constructs using anything within this trust, having to pay rent to use it, which is actually taxes. So we've got a system of modern slavery. It's based on debt. Nobody owns anything. The original creditors have got the legal title to everything. That's land, property, infrastructure, anything that operates in this game of commerce. It looks like there's money, but there's not. There's just ledgers, and they're all based on debt. So the whole world is floating on enormous debt. People think that they're prosperous, but actually all they have is digits, and those digits are negative. They're negative value. They should all have a minus sign in front of them. So there's no way of paying anything. There's no way of owning anything. And the only way you can carry on playing the game is to go out and work, or go out and create things and run businesses, or get a job, or whatever it is that you're doing to effectively get further into debt. And that's how the whole system works.
Okay, so in terms of, so that people can understand this a little bit more clearly, and just to be clear for you guys, I got off on the wrong footing at the very beginning. Okay, this is not our webinar Q&A. This is our preview for this coming Saturday's webinar, which is going to be on the 6th of June with Ian and myself. What Ian's talking about and what we spearhead here with the Monopoly Game Changer Protocol involves something called the 945 tax module. So if you've been watching our webinars of recent, you'll know what signature credit tax redirection is. Hopefully you'll have a basic understanding of what that is. If you don't, and you're brand new to this, then this coming Saturday, 10 a.m. UK time, we're going to be addressing the signature credit tax redirection, but it comes from the bank's 945 tax modules. And there are some very inconvenient truths that the banks don't want you to know about that tax module in particular. So when Ian is talking about the history surrounding money, this monopoly board that we're all playing on and that we have these player pieces on, a lot of this is going to make more sense when you come to the webinar this Saturday. And I'll talk to that very briefly at the end of today's session. But Ian, okay, so once we understand this trap, if somebody understands the trap, it really does change, doesn't it? How we view debts, how we view loans, how we view mortgages, how we view credit cards, you know, anything to do with money entirely. Could you just walk us through very quickly? I know you're going to expand on this on Saturday, but could you walk us through very briefly, how do the banks monetize our signature to create currency out of nothing? And maybe just for the purposes of what we're going to talk about on Saturday, if you could briefly explain the hidden corporate strategy that the banks are using behind their 945 withholding tax modules.
Well, the banks monetize the signature. So the living soul is the agent for the birth certificate construct, which we're often referred to as the citizen or the straw man. Has many other names, the ens legis. I call it the birth certificate construct, which is actually, a decedent estate, because it was originally the registration of the placenta which dies. So it creates a decedent estate. That decedent estate is registered to the crown or to the state. It's theirs, but it's regarded on the Monopoly Board of Commerce as a banker. If you look at the Bills of Exchange Act of 1882, I've just done a paper on the Bills of Exchange Act and what it really means. Also UCC3, which is based on the Bills of Exchange Act. What they did was they created this artificial construct as a banking entity. It's because in order to transfer human energy onto the Monopoly Board, there had to be a banking entity that could issue securities. Well, securities are promises to pay in the future. So when you make a bank payment, when you sign up for a loan, credit card, or mortgage, what you're actually doing is the living soul is transferring human energy through the birth certificate construct, which is a banking entity. The signature deposits human energy. The banks take that human energy, that promise to pay in the future. It's an asset to them. They match it on the other side of their balance sheet with a liability, a matching liability. So this is what's called ex nihilo credit creation. The Bank of England talks about it. Professor Richard Werner talks about it. The Federal Reserve talk about it. So it's not just me that's talking about it. There's lots and lots of evidence to back it up. Now, that debt that's been created is a security. And what the banks do is they operate as nominees. Nominee is another name for a fiduciary or a trustee. So the banks are actually operating as trustees for the original creator of the energy, which is the living soul. The banks operate as nominees. They bundle these securities up and they trade them. It's what they call hypothecate them. Again, I've written a paper on this just recently, which I'll be publishing very, very soon on Ecclesia Law Institute. So the banks are like using human energy wrapped in these things called securities. The clearing banks, the one that you get the mortgage with, the one that you use for bank payments, credit cards, loans, etc., they sell these securities to the investment banks. The investment banks, in order to disguise what's really going on, they register these securities with the Depository Trust Company and a subsidiary called Seed and Company. And Seed and Company changes the name of the structures that the investment banks use and call them different names. So if you're searching around, you're not going to see these securities are owned by the investment banks. You're going to see what's known, what they're referred to in my documents as street names. So the Seed and Company gives them a different name, these bundles of securities, and the investment banks, because the investment banks are using the securities to hypothecate. So basically they multiply the value of the securities up. They use them as collateral to expand the money supply to create more profit for the investment banks. But because those securities which they are using are based on ex nihilo credit creation, the banks pay taxes for the use of the human energy that is driving these securitizations. And that is what they are paying taxes on, the 945 tax modules. That human energy, which is taxed under the 1099 OID calculation, which is a future value discounted to a current value, which determines the tax that the investment bank should be paying for the use of the human energy, but they vastly underfund their 945 tax module payments because they don't believe that anyone's going to figure out what they're doing with these 945 tax modules, and very few people are going to know how to redirect the taxes that belong to them as creditors. So they vastly underfund these 945 ledgers. But it's the everything can be tracked, and they really don't want you to know about this because they are effectively admitting that they're using human energy and they're paying tax for the use of it, and they really don't want the world to know this.
Wow, I mean, I remember when I first found out about this, I got quite angry. I'm not going to lie, and we've spoken about that before. But again, thinking on the lines of maybe somebody who's listening to this for the very first time, if you're sitting there thinking, so you're telling me that over the lifetime of me taking out loans, credit cards, mortgages, whatever it may be, and then just pushing money into the system through my general day-to-day expenditure, I'm owed taxes back from all the investment banks for the use of my credit energy. The next logical question to an individual is going to be, how do I get it back? Now, there's lots of things floating around the internet on this, as we know. You mentioned a moment ago, Ian, about 1099 OID. If you went and Google 1099 OID, you'll find a lot of horror stories surrounding that. So, when people blindly file these OID refund claims under their standard social security number, they're walking right into an automated trap, aren't they, Ian? I mean, what happens to a retail filing when that takes place? And then how does your 98 series international grantor trust protocol, using that, how does that create that firewall for an individual?
Well, the trust is bankrupt and the debtors are the birth certificate constructs, together with the governments, together with the companies. They're not entitled to redirect taxes. They can't qualify. They don't qualify for tax redirection. Only creditors in this worldwide bankruptcy qualify for tax redirection because if they are operating as a creditor, then they're entitled to the taxes that the debtors are paying for the use of the human energy. So the way that the Clifford Protocol works is it creates a creditor entity, which is an international trust separate from the birth certificate constructs, which are all debtors, and it can then legitimately take up something called holder in due course. So it can become a creditor, and it then has rights to redirect the taxes which the investment banks are paying for the use of the human energy. That tax can then be redirected to a creditor entity, which is what it was intended for in the first place. But because the investment banks don't file 1099 OID, because they want to presume that they are the creditors, because they want to carry on using the human energy for hypothecation, they don't file 1099 OID. But if a foreign grantor's trust, an international trust, files 1099 OID with all the right references and linkages and forensic research that's put it all together, now the trust has become the creditor. The investment bank it can no longer hold itself out as a creditor because the record has been corrected. The taxes can now be redirected that the investment banks are paying, though, and it's a giveaway. If they're paying taxes, they have to be debtors, because only debtors pay taxes within this worldwide bankruptcy. And now the true creditor, which is the foreign grantor trust holder in due course, is entitled to that tax redirection, and it's perfectly lawful. It's exactly how the Monopoly Board was wired up. House Joint Resolution 192, all of the UCC, that's the Uniform Commercial Code, SEC codes, IRS codes, all line up to the redirection of taxes to the true creditors, which can be 98, they're called 98 series foreign grantor trusts.
Ian, this completely redefines what it means to have financial freedom for people, I think. And we've only just scratched the surface in this sort of 20-30 minutes here of just the basic mechanics today. So if you're watching this and you want to learn more, you need to be in the room on Saturday morning with Ian and myself, 10 a.m. UK time. We're going to be hosting a comprehensive closed-door masterclass breaking down the exact process, including why the banks do not want you to know the truth about this 945 tax module. You don't want to miss this. So here's what I want you to do now, okay? Go to the link that is on my screen right now. Let me put this up for you. You can go to roswebinars.is and you can register there. We have a limited number of seats. What we're revealing here, the content is of a sensitive nature, as you can well imagine. The banks don't want you to know this. They really don't. So we've got limited spaces for the webinar, 1,000 seats. They will fill up quickly. So go to roswebinars.is, get yourself registered, share the content as well with other people. And I would highly recommend that you bring like-minded people with you. Don't let the people that you care about keep playing a bankrupt game that they're destined to lose. Help them to educate themselves along with you on what they can do to win. And we will see you there, 10 a.m. sharp, Saturday, June the 6th, UK time, for the webinar. And the title of that webinar, let me read that out to you one more time. It is Signature Credit Tax Redirection from Banks' 945 Tax Modules, the inconvenient truths that the banks don't want you to know. We'll see you on Saturday morning. Bye for now.